Hello everyone, welcome to another Odd Commander deck tech. I love the Edge of Eternities set for its creativity and expansion into science fiction. I'm a big science fiction fan and there's so much to talk about with this set. I wanted to start with a commander that I thought was the most interesting and unique among the new commanders. A commander that wants to do a tried and true tactic in a new and unique and efficient way. I'm talking about Xu-Ifit, Osteoharmonist. Xu-Ifit is a 3-cost human wizard that says, tap, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a skeleton in addition to its other types, and it has no abilities. This is one of the most efficient ways to reanimate a creature repeatedly that we've ever seen. The interesting thing is that the reanimated creature has no abilities, meaning that it just copies its other characteristics, power and toughness, mana value, types, etc. So the real value that we're getting out of reanimating these is either that they're just big bodies for us to swing with, or we can take advantage of the characteristics that are copied in other ways, such as the mana value or the power being important for some spells. The goal of the deck that I've built is to build value by filling up our graveyard and generating resources through sacrificing and reanimating creatures. We're aiming to finish out the game by overrunning the board with our graveyard, or by using draining effects to drain the life out of our opponents. The difficult thing about talking about a Reanimator and Aristocrat deck is that there are so many things to talk about that are all important and they're all kind of interweaved together. There's just so much synergy with this kind of strategy. Oftentimes your sacrifice outlets are also serving one or two other purposes. It's hard to talk about the finishers without talking about how we're going to get them out. So let's start with the basic utility and work our way up. So let's start with ramp. Arcane Signet, Charcoal Diamond, and Patriarch Seal are our most basic mana rocks, doing just what they say they do on the tin. We'll talk a little bit later about the untapping shenanigans with Patriarch Seal. Ashnod's Altar and Warren Soul Trader sacrifice creatures to make mana, while Pitiless Plunderer gives us mana whenever a creature dies. Crypt of Agadeem gives us a resource that gets better with more mill and more creatures ending up in our graveyard. Dark Ritual is a simple way to get our commander out, and our absolutely best pieces in the deck for ramp are Illuminor Xeris and Soldevi Adnet, two creatures that basically do the same thing. Tap to sacrifice a creature and gain black mana equal to that creature's mana value. You don't see these as often in Aristocrats decks because those decks are mostly going off of token sacrifice, and those tokens often do not have mana values. But here we have a very easy way to get creatures back that have high mana values. We'll cover which creatures those are later, but you can see that if we have a way to untap one of these creatures repeatedly, we can create a loop of sacrificing a creature and generating mana to fuel more reanimation or casting from our hands. We've talked about a couple of Sac Outlets, so let's cover the other ones. Altar of Dementia is great with Xu-Ifit. It looks at the power of creatures that are being sacrificed and mills equal to that value. This fuels our graveyard and will trigger death and reanimation triggers that we'll talk about later. Carrion Feeder and Yeheni Undying Partisan are great at repeated sacrificing, and they also combo really well with Altar of Dementia since they get bigger and bigger, and then you can sacrifice it to the altar to mill a whole bunch of cards. Umbral Caller Zealot and Viscera Seer are great because they basically do the same thing. The Zealot is a new way for us to repeatedly surveil, and that's going to be an all-star in any deck that cares about death. And Viscera Seer, even though Umbral Caller Zealot is strictly better in this kind of deck, digging for the cards that we want is still going to be really helpful. We have a few tappable sacrifice outlets with Ayara, First of Lochthwain, High Market, and Priest of Forgotten Gods. Again, with untapping synergies, we could get a lot of value out of these creatures. Torgar, Famine Incarnate lets us sacrifice a bunch of creatures when it enters and make a big impact on people's life totals, but I really like it here because it has such a high mana value, and therefore being able to generate a lot of mana with the ramp pieces mentioned earlier. Skull Clamp is a great draw engine for any Aristocrats deck, although it's a little less effective here because we're not focusing on making 1/1 tokens as much. There are still some great applications in the deck, and it's very hard to beat 2 cards per death for 1 mana. Let's talk about the specific synergistic pieces with our commander. First off, our commander cares about skeletons and makes skeletons, so it's good to have some skeleton synergy, especially if we're ever hoping to attack, because most of these cards give them some sort of benefit in attacking. So Death Baron and Corpses of the Lost are great with skeletons. Death Priest of Miracle and Skeleton Crew specifically synergize with this game plan by rewarding us for what the deck is already doing. Next, untapping our commander and other creatures is incredibly useful and can lead to high value turns, so we've included some untapping engines. Thornbite Staff is the star of the show here, as it untaps on death triggers and is a one-of-a-kind combo engine for this kind of a deck. Attaching it to Xu-Ifit and having a repeatable Sac Outlet will get you infinite death triggers, reanimation triggers, and potentially enter the battlefield triggers, as well as whatever value you're getting out of your Sac Outlet. It's a must-have with Xu-Ifit, and getting it onto your commander will help you win the game very quickly. With enough mana, Staff of Domination also performs this function, so this works especially well with Sildevi Adnit and Illuminor Xeris. If we have something with mana value 8, and we can repeatedly cycle that using Staff of Domination and one of these Sac Outlets, then we enter the same kind of loop here. So we have a couple of 8 mana value creatures for this specific purpose. We have a few more synergistic pieces that didn't really fit with anything else. We have a Cursed Duneyard that gives us some regeneration powers for most of the creatures in our deck, including skeletons if it's not their time to go. Necrotic Ooze is a great catch-all for these Sac Outlets that will help us be able to sacrifice our Sac Outlets and get them back for value. And then Shadow Alley Denizen is just a great and efficient way to give our skeletons some invasion if we need to swing through with them. Our commander, as we mentioned, already reanimates very efficiently, but there are cases when we want a creature back after it's been wiped of its abilities, and we want those abilities back, or maybe we just want some redundancy since our commander taps down and we might not be able to have a way to untap it yet, and we still have things we want to do with our turn. So this category has a bunch of useful tools to solve this problem. One of my favorite bits of tech with this is Malakir Rebirth. The front side of this will return a creature from death after it dies. The cool thing about this is that the creature leaves the battlefield and comes back, meaning that it's a new object, which means it has any of its abilities that might have been wiped out by Xu-Ifit, and so they return very efficiently with all of their original abilities. So I've included this as well as Not Dead After All, Supernatural Stamina, and Undying Malice to give us a little bit more redundancy since it's such a cool effect. We've got a hodgepodge of other reanimation effects here, kind of depending on what scenario we're in. Agadeem's Awakening can help us get creatures back really efficiently. Apprentice Necromancer gives us sack triggers as well as reanimating something very early in the game. Gora's the Tomb Shell is a card that I've been wanting to put in a deck for a really long time, and I'm really excited that it fits in here. It can help us bring back a selection of creatures, and it can cast for really cheap. It's 8 mana, which helps us with our high mana value creatures, so it fits in perfectly here. Meathook Massacre 2 is a great board wipe for this deck, and also enables us to pretty efficiently get creatures that we sacrifice back if we want their effects back on the card. Although with the downside that they have a finality counter on them, which means they can't loop anymore. Oversold Cemetery gets us cards back into our hand if we have a bunch of creatures in the yard already. Reassembling Skeleton reanimates itself, which is always very handy if we lose all of our other engines. Vat of Rebirth can get us creatures back after so many of our creatures die. And Witch's Cottage can put a creature back on top if we have 3 swamps already, which is not going to be difficult in this mono black deck. One of the ways that we can win is by draining our opponents through ETB and death triggers, which is what our Aristocrats are here for. Any number of these on the field will make our game plan go faster and gain us a bunch of life. We already mentioned Ayara First of Locthwain as a good sack outlet, but it also has a great ETB trigger for our reanimation to benefit off of. Bastion of Remembrance and Funeral Room are great enchantments that are resilient and hard to get rid of. Blood Artist, Venerated Stormsinger, and Zoluport Cutthroat are just great at that draining effect, and Sir Conrad the Grim does everything that we want it to do. It benefits us from milling, sacrificing, and reanimating, and it gives us a mill outlet if we have a whole bunch of mana, which is amazing. Aristocrats get better with tokens, so we have included a couple of ways to get tokens. We mentioned Death Priest of Miracle and Skeleton Crew earlier. We also have Abhorrent Overlord, which serves as a once-a-turn sack outlet, as well as a great way to get a bunch of tokens at once. It's going to be important to continue to fuel our hand and our graveyard for our value engines. We've already talked about some, like Umbral Caller Zealot and Altar of Dementia are great mill engines, and Priest of Forgotten Gods is a great sack outlet that lets us draw. So let's talk about the rest that we have in this deck for the explicit purpose of drawing and milling. One card that I really enjoy from Tarkir Dragonstorm is Bone Devourer. It's a cool little trick because we can either make this really big through our own looping or just use it in response to a board wipe, which can help us recover from any unexpected surprises. Decree of Pain, in kind of the opposite direction, will cause the board wipe and let us draw cards for every creature destroyed this way, or, if we want to keep around our commander, will simply let us draw one card to do a -2/-2 across the board. Both methods have their uses and benefits. Doomweaver is a really fun bit of tech for this deck. The Soul Bond mechanic is fascinating because it lets you choose a creature when it comes in, and then immediately sacrifice it. If you're looping Reanimation and sacrificing repeatedly, you can just use Doomweaver repeatedly on that entering creature to really easily draw through your deck. Bonus if the creature is more than just a 1/1, it goes faster, but not necessarily required if you're going infinite anyways. Insatiable Avarice, I'm going to start putting in more decks. Some situations call for the tutor half of the card, but mostly I'm probably going to be using this to draw 3 cards for 3 mana. So it's a great and versatile card for any mono black deck. Morbid Opportunist lets us draw 1 card per turn for sacrificing our creatures, which is great for a slow value build. Suster Secundi Void Altar is an awesome sack outlet that's kind of hard to turn online and only works once per turn, but gives us cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and again, playing into the benefits of having big creatures to reanimate and sacrifice with Xu-Ifit. We've also got Village Rites, which is a great instant speed Skull Clamp effect, and War Room, which is a pretty efficient draw engine on a land. Moving on to the mill effects, we've got Cemetery Tampering. It mills us for 3 every turn, it only costs 3 mana to get out, and it has that hideaway ability that's really not going to be hard to trigger and get a free cast off of the top of our library. Doom Whisperer is just one of the coolest ideas that came out of Ravnica and the birth of the Surveil mechanic. It's a great Surveil engine, it has a big body, so it's perfect for this deck. Golgari Thug and Stinkweed Imp let us dredge, milling cards in exchange for drawing, with the former providing a good reanimation engine in a pinch. These are some of the fastest ways to fill up your graveyard for relatively cheap. Incarnation Technique gets us 10 cards and 2 reanimations in a single cast, and that's well worth the 5 mana. And last, we've got Spymaster's Vaults. That lets us connive based on how many creatures died this turn, a great way to draw a bunch and discard a bunch and get a big creature. I love to see more unique effects on lands, and I hope we see more creativity like this in future sets. Finally, we've made it to the finishers section. So we've actually talked about some of them already. First, our finisher category number 1 is our Aristocrats and draining our opponents, just having a whole bunch of those out and looping creatures repeatedly to go for the win. Finisher plan number 2 is doing it in a much more explosive fashion with Grey Merchant of Asphodel or Kakusha the Evening Star, which makes a lot of draining happen very quickly. If we can reanimate and sacrifice these creatures multiple times, very few of our opponents are going to be able to stand against that. Our final game plan is to overrun the board with Living Death, Bringer of the Last Gift, or Awakening Hall. We're going to be able to sacrifice a ton of creatures at will, and then using any one of these effects will let us bring them all back and clear out the board for their revival. These spells absolutely win games all the time. Awakening Hall is especially cool because if it's already on the battlefield as the other half, it's going to be an ability, not a spell, meaning it's hard to interact with and will almost certainly win you the game. And that's it for my Xu-Ifit deck. It proves to be a very fun and dynamic Reanimator commander. I'm really excited to build it and bring it to my commander table. Let me know in the comments what you're building from Edge of Eternities, what your favorite new cards from the set are, and how you're building Xu-Ifit. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.